we will go ahead and get started. Thank you again for everyone who is joining us either live or watching the recording later. If you can see the slide, you're all set. All live attendees are muted on entry, but feel free to use the chat feature for questions and comments, and continue to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already done so. And we'll have some opportunities for you all to discuss and participate as well. So feel free at those points either to unmute your mic to participate or to just add to the chat as well. We welcome any and all levels of participation. As we go through our session today, we encourage you to engage in the chat to ask questions and discuss and participate. And then also feel free to share anything from your own personal context as well. I always love to hear stories from educators and what they're doing in their classrooms. And we've got a wide range of locations here today, and I'm sure we've got a wide range of experiences as far as grade level and subject area. So it's always great to, in these sessions, particularly in these virtual sessions, to be able to connect with other educators from around the world. So as we are going through our session today, feel free to participate in the chat and share your thoughts. And then also to think about what you're learning today and to think about how it can help you and your students, and really think about, how do I see myself using this? How can I use this skill and for what purpose? So we will talk about some specific technology tools. We'll provide some examples, but know that the goal is really to help you and your students, and what you do in your classroom might look different than some of the other participants. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. So I want to start with a check-in. So I'd like to know how comfortable you are with using multimedia creation tools. So when I say multimedia creation tools, that might be digital book creators, recording audio and video, multimedia presentations that have text and images, and maybe some links and videos within those presentations. So would just like to know in the Zoom chat, on a scale of 1, least comfortable, to 5, most comfortable, please share that in the chat. And if you want to share, a little bit more context of kind of like what tools you use, you're welcome to do that too. And I see a 4 and a 2 and a few 3s. And welcome to those of you that are just now joining us. Happy to have everyone here today. We're just doing a check-in to see how comfortable you are with using creation tools. If you are comfortable sharing that in the chat. It looks like we've got a range so far from our initial responses in the chat. Those of you that are on the more comfortable end, feel free to share your ideas and your tools as we go through this session, and your project examples. Those of you that are maybe less comfortable, hopefully today you'll learn about some tools and ideas for implementing multimedia creation and using audio and video in your classroom. And to introduce myself, I am Caitlin McLemore. I'm joining you from Tampa, Florida today. I am an instructor with EdTech Teacher, and we are a partner with Digital Promise and Bill's program. And I, previous to being an instructor with EdTech Teacher, was an educational technology coach at independent schools in the Tampa Bay area and Nashville as well, working with students and teachers in kindergarten through 12th grade to help integrate technology into the classroom. So I'm glad to be with you all today. And I have my wonderful moderator, Sherry, here with me as well.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sherry Lofton. I'm an instructional technology trainer here with the VILS program. I'm really excited to be here. I come with a background in education, teaching everything from 2nd to 8th grade. I have been in coaching and in administration. So I've also been a big proponent for project-based learning and media literacy. So we are really excited to bring this to you today.
So our objectives for today are to help you all learn how to use audio and video and how those tools can be integrated into the classroom to help foster creativity and critical thinking, and to help as students demonstrate their understanding in those project-based learning environments or just generally. And then to help you all understand how to properly structure multimedia projects to emphasize the learning over the tools. So we will talk about some specific tools, but we'll also talk about the learning goals as well, of course. So when we think about media, or we think about audio and visual and multimedia, some of the things I mentioned in our check-in, we want to define media literacy. And so media literacy is the ability to access and analyze and evaluate and create and communicate using media in all of its forms, whether that's audio, visual images or videos, whatever media form you're using, being able to find it, to analyze it, to use it, and then to share it out with your stakeholders or your audience. So media literacy education, and this list is from the National Association of Media Literacy and Education. That organization suggests that media literacy education requires critical thinking about the media that we consume and we create. So being thoughtful about what we watch, what we consume, and also thoughtful about what we're producing. And that includes both students and teachers. It includes all forms of media, whether that's print or digital, whether that's audio or video, and it's a continuum of skills development. So I asked your comfort level with audio and video tools, and I did a range of 1 to 5, and there was a wide range in there. And in one of the previous sessions, we had someone say 5+. Right, so 5, but I'm very comfortable with the tool, but I also want to learn more, and I know that there's always skills that we can practice and develop. And it's important to develop these skills because it helps students to become engaged and informed and reflective participants in the digital society. So much of our world is online these days, and really knowing how to interact with the media that we create and that we consume is really helpful for students, not just in the classroom, but as lifelong learners and participants in a digital world. It's also important to integrate media from diverse perspectives and to help students use a personalized lens to engage with media content. So different people interpret and consume and create media in different ways. And that's a critical part of that media literacy concept. So by using multimedia, students can learn effective communication skills. They can learn how to interact with diverse audiences. They can learn how to tell a compelling story or send a compelling message, that creation and distribution piece. Multimedia projects. So if we talk about projects that use audio and video, and then some of those other images and text. Multimedia projects really necessitate using real world skills, that communication piece, but also collaborating with other group members. If it's a group project, being creative and displaying how students display their message, organizing and planning content, presenting the final product, and then really thinking about research and synthesis of the information that goes into those multimedia projects. Multimedia creation provides students with a creative way to express their understanding of the curriculum in a personalized manner, with opportunities for real world connections. So some students might create a video where they're doing a mock news report, or some students might do a podcast where they're interviewing other classmates about a current events topic, or some students might design a website where you learn more about the country or culture that you're exploring. So there's so many different ways that students can personalize the content and really connect it to that real world audience as well. So when you're doing multimedia projects or projects that include audio and video in the classroom, what is the teacher doing in this sense? The teacher is facilitating the media creation through guidance and best practices at each stage of the creation. So when you do project-based learning, or when you have personalized learning and you provide student choice and voice in how they're demonstrating their understanding, students don't just naturally know how to do each of the steps of creating multimedia. So it's really important for the teacher to guide them and provide best practices and examples and some structure, or for how do we set up a plan for what we want to create. What are some best practices for research? What are some credible sources, or what are some questionable sources? What is it to do a storyboard? Why is it important to plan out what's going to go into your media creation before you actually create? And then what are some strategies and tips and tricks for the creation process? How do we communicate with each other? How do we work within a group to create? And then also guiding and modeling that reflection process, and then helping students think about who is their audience and how they're going to share that as well. And yes, I see Sherry mentioned in the chat too, that students can really become connected to the outside world with some of these media projects. So whether it's a public website, or they're sharing their video amongst families and communities, or even to a broader audience, it's really valuable for students to have something that is seen outside those classroom walls. I also like that idea, Rita, of students videoing their process. So they might be making a video and then do a video of their video. I've seen that in classroom projects where there's one student who it's their role to document the learning process, which really helps with that reflection piece. It really helps show their progress for the teacher. And that can be really valuable for those students. So a teacher can also provide some scaffolding and support. So some groups might need a little bit more support and guidance, and having that structure as far as directing them to maybe the sources, or helping them through that research part, for example, where other groups you might be able to just send them off and they can kind of do that more independently. But really providing that scaffolding and support that's personalized to the individual or group to ensure that all students are creating high quality products and creating products that are meaningful and personal to them. And then encouraging students to actively engage with the creation process and really help them connect creating and media with the curriculum and the topics that they're engaging with. So I see a question in the chat about coaches supporting teachers to empower students to use multimedia. So a lot of times when I was working with teachers on multimedia projects in the classroom, the teacher would really serve as the curriculum expert, and then I would go in and be there as the, sort of the technology expert, and I'd be familiar with the content and the teacher would be familiar with the tool, but I was really there to help support students in making sure that the tool was really accessible to them. Now, if you aren't able to do sort of that co-teaching or that collaborative experience, maybe as a technology coach, you can create some tutorial videos or create like a one-pager document with best practices, or if you're thinking about research tips, whether it's a librarian or a library technology specialist, just doing some of those short do a short screencast or do a short tips and tricks for a certain tool or for a certain process. Like, how do we do a keyword search, or where can we go to learn about current events? So those are some ideas. Does anyone else have suggestions as far as coaches supporting teachers in their classrooms.
One thing I think of too is just really helping the teacher understand that the teacher does not have to be the purveyor of knowledge when it comes to the tech tool, especially when you get in the older grades. But even as young as third grade, the students will begin to adapt and pick up those tech tools. And it's really cool to be able to say, hey, I'm learning this tech alongside of you. And it takes some pressure off the teacher who may not have time or know all of the tech tools. They know that content really well, but being able to learn alongside of the student and feeling comfortable to do that. It models it for the students, that vulnerability, and it's great for the teachers to build that connection and model what we really do in the real world.
Absolutely. That is a great point. And to the point of teachers that are more resistant, really, if you have some model or examples of successful projects from other teachers that you've worked with that are maybe more collaborative or have been open to those technology tools, and really speaking to that idea of active and deeper learning and showing them and thinking about how that tool can help bring the curriculum alive or bring that content alive and really help them engage with that content in a different way that can help maybe some of those more reluctant teachers. Yes, same thing that you're saying in the chat too. Brainstorming sessions with teachers and taking existing lessons and saying, okay, you're having them write a research paper, but what if you have them write it in a collaborative group? Or what if they do a newsletter and they're posting it and sharing it with people around the world, and they're using a blog, so they have commenting features so they can kind of engage with that content in a deeper way, and facilitating that learning process.
Yeah, and Caitlin, to add to that, I think it's also important that whether you're the teacher who is trying to incorporate multimedia, or you're coaching other teachers, that it's sometimes really helpful to be the person who kind of pulls back the use of technology. Because I think the most frequent mistake I see is people who want to implement like a really highly technical developed multimedia project as their first thing. And you really kind of want to introduce the technology slowly over time, build capacity both for the instructor and the students at the same time, and build up to like those really big kind of multimedia projects with lots of choice and voice. And so sometimes as a coach, it's literally you just like talking to the teacher and being like, hey, why don't we just start with this piece first? And then let's introduce this like a couple of weeks later, and then building that stuff in slowly over time.
Right. Definitely start small, start with something that is going to be a win, that is not going to take a lot of time investment or be this huge, difficult, overwhelming thing for some of those more resistant teachers. And then when they see that works, that helps you build that relationship and be able to continue to sort of stretch that or build upon that success and that momentum. So great question. Yes. Now we've talked about teachers and we've talked about coaches. What is the role of the students in creating multimedia projects? Students can begin with a challenge or a driving question. So thinking about what is interesting to them about a topic, what do they want to explore, what is the message that they want to share, and then students of course are engaging in the whole cycle of the multimedia project through planning and design, whether that's curating content, so like looking for images and video clips to put into their project or their presentation, whether that's doing an outline or storyboarding or writing a script or editing. So really thinking through and being thoughtful of what it is they want to create and how they're going to do it. And then focusing on that driving question and focusing on implementing that plan as they take their technology tools, whether that's something that you as the teacher have prescribed, or if you're giving them some choice, using that to demonstrate their understanding of whatever topic or content they're exploring. So if we think about the technology that you can use to create multimedia, so teachers and coaches can help identify specific multimedia creation tools to best help students demonstrate that they've met learning objectives. So one, you might have a learning objective that allows for a variety of different multimedia projects, or you might, some projects, a podcast might be really interesting, but other projects might be better suited for a video or a website, or just a digital presentation, or maybe a digital book. So depending on what the topic is and what you want them to demonstrate, you might choose different tools. So some of the things to think about are student access to devices and existing software subscriptions. So what do you have access to at your school or district? What do students have access to? What is their prior experience? So you might want to do a project that has a new tool, but if students are brand new to that tool, you'll have to build in that, that teaching them the tool piece, or make that part of that process or that project. And then consider providing students with choices when appropriate and possible. So some examples of tools. So if you're thinking about podcasting, you might use SoundCloud. If you're looking at digital presentations, you might think about Google Slides or Microsoft PowerPoint, or even Sway or Adobe Spark. You can do screencasts with Loom or Screencastify. If you've got access to Macs, there's some built-in screencasting tools with QuickTime. And then video creation, you can use something like WeVideo or iMovie. It really is dependent on the tool or the hardware that you have access to and the software that you have access to. But though I've provided some examples very briefly about different types of multimedia tools, it's not so much about the tool, it's about what you're doing with the tool, right? So you might use WeVideo to create a 2-minute commercial for a, maybe you're learning about the periodic table of elements and everyone has to create a video about their element. You can use WeVideo for that. You can use QuickTime for that. You can use a number of tools for that. There's so many tools that you might have access to, or if you don't, there's lots of free and easy tools to use, like Rita is suggesting. There's a lot of free tools that you can use, or a lot of tools have sort of an introductory level as far as like a free access, so you can try it out. So some other tool ideas, if you think about throughout the process, collaborating and planning. So you might use collaborative documents to do script writing, or slides for storyboarding. And then that allows student groups to comment and provide feedback with each other. You might even use discussion boards to engage with the content, or sort of plan out what it is that they're going to create. And then we've got a link here to a resource, a guidebook, as far as some additional digital tool ideas for different things like creating multimedia presentations or digital books and things like that. So that's linked in the slide deck. And then we're going to do just a quick check-in before we go into our application activity. So how are we doing in the chat? Type in your number. I'm just going to say go. And are you 1, unclear about multimedia, 2, understand, or 3, could explain it to others? And hopefully we've got lots of 2s and 3s, because we've got some application and discussion time coming up. And if you have any other specific questions, feel free to ask those. I did love that discussion about coaching and engaging teachers. if you're unclear, feel free to say one, and we can discuss that too. I didn't mean to direct your answers, but I'm glad everyone is feeling, it looks like everyone's feeling pretty confident. All right. So now what we have is an opportunity to apply your learning and to get to engage with some of the other participants in this session. So our first step is we have 3 different article choices. They're very brief articles. So I'll just demonstrate here. This one talks about multimedia storytelling. We also have one about using video content to amplify learning, and then a way to promote student voice literally. So talking about podcasting, and that one's with a 2nd grade teacher. Let me see. This one, I'm not sure that there is a specific grade level, so it can be applicable to all levels. But you have a choice. So choose one of the following articles to read, and Sherry has pasted those into the chat. So would it be helpful to have sort of a timer, or do we want to just have some quiet time to read? Let's see. Maybe we'll just do 5 minutes for reading time, and then we're going to discuss and do a Padlet activity as well. Yes, even if you don't teach younger grades, that 2nd grade example I think can be applicable to all grade levels as well. So we'll do 5 minutes of reading, and then we'll come back together and I'll introduce our breakout activity. Together. Thank you for starting that again. So instead of doing breakout rooms, since we've got a smaller group, I think we can do this here. I would love to hear your thoughts either on microphone or on video or in chat, what you learned from those articles, if there were any project ideas or tools that you're interested in using that you learned about, or if you have some examples from your own classroom or your own context. We'd just love to hear a little bit more about your ideas, your examples. Quiet group today. If you have some multimedia to share, like if you have project examples that you're really proud of, or that maybe some of your teachers have created, we do have a Padlet for this session. So if you haven't used Padlet before, it's a sort of like a digital bulletin board. And we've got different columns here talking about empowering students to use video and audio for learning. And I'm not sure if this is something we can link to with the YouTube recording, but you know, if people who are watching this later can add their ideas too. But if you have project examples, if you click on the link to the Padlet, which we'll share in the chat in just a minute, you can click on the plus sign beneath any of these columns and share some ideas for projects or some examples or even some student artifacts if you have those as well. So it looks like Lori's excited about trying podcasting. Yes, podcasting is one of those that I think can be, it can feel intimidating, but right, if you just have a tool that you know, I'm glad you had some tool suggestions to just try it out. So I'm glad that your confidence has increased.
You know, it's interesting. about the what Lori's been saying about podcasting, because I'm so excited about that too. And what I noticed, well, especially like when I got to middle school, I noticed like third, fourth grade kids are more willing to be on camera. But once they got to middle school, they started acting weird. They didn't want to be on camera. So they started wanting to make animated videos. And because they didn't want people to see them, but they still liked, you know, the sound and all those qualities. So I think podcasting might be cool too. So I'm excited to look more into that as well. I'm trying to find the animated video tool that we used, and it was free, which is most important, but it was very intuitive. So lots of students made videos off of that. I'm trying to remember it.
And I like that idea of going out into the school community and asking questions and seeing what people around the school think. That can be really interesting.
And if you're not ready to, you know, necessarily implement a project like this, there's a lot of organizations, like I know NPR for a while, and they may still be doing this year, but they were collecting stories from the, you know, from the community, and they had like a little app and recorder with kind of guidelines of, you know, how students could talk to grandparents or family members and ask them about historical periods or different things like that. And so, you know, sometimes there's places that kind of already have those built-in components built in, and you can kind of just use that as a launch pad for an activity in the class and support that learning, and having someone else do the technical work for you.
Yes, definitely look into some of those organizations like StoryCorps or NPR, and right, they provide a space for you to submit your stories, so you're getting to engage with that content without having to do all that technical work. I'm giving you a +1 on that. I didn't add anything to that other than that's a great example, right? You don't always have to start from scratch, for sure.
Biteable, that's it. Biteable makes the best animated videos, and it's free.
Okay, we'll do a little, there we go. Ooh, that is a crazy looking link for some reason. I'm not really sure why. So, well, thank you, Sherry. That one's a little better.
Let me make it an actual hyperlink that's clickable.
Sure. Now, you know, I see that Lori is saying thanks for these resources. So, you know, we have that Padlet with some of those examples if you wanted to share that, or some of your project ideas. But we also have a student multimedia creation tools Google Doc that we can add some of these to. And then if you all have tools that you like to use, would love to see what tools you're using. So we can add what we've talked about in this session to this Google Doc, but it is set so that anybody on the internet can edit. So if you have specific tools that you love, that you want to talk about, you want to add, you can. Let me see if we can add Biteable in here. So it should be that you can just add in your link, or even if you don't have the link, you can just, you know, say what it is. So like you could say Powtoon is a cartoon creator creation software. I think Powtoon is one of those that has like paid and free versions. So I think it has like a limited repository of content that you can add to. What's the other one? So we can just take a few minutes here. I can show you, for those of you that aren't familiar with Powtoon, they have like a lot of clip art and icons that you can use to create some more of those animated videos as well. Oh, there's an anonymous pumpkin. Not to single you out, but usually it's an animal. I have never seen an object before.
Okay, so I found some that my students have made before. It was with the Biteable. I found like one of their things that they made when they're public facing.
Oh, can we?
Yeah, I put both of them in the chat just for folks to see. It was so intuitive for the students to use, and they taught me. I didn't know how to use it, and I learned alongside of them. So it was really cool.
I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah, I can hear it.
That was great. And so I'm assuming like all of the animated clips and things are content within Biteable.
Yeah, all that's within Biteable. And we've been working on juxtaposition, making sure like what they're saying, is they're having images that capture or relate to what they're saying at the same time. So they were working on that. But yeah.
And the information and media literacy expert in me is appreciative that they had that references at the end, for the information.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
right. And
Mm-hmm.
see, that's an interesting thing too, if you think about like the product that they share out isn't necessarily like, there's so many more components if you think about a project that like the planning that went into that, and all of they had to write all of the script and think about, right, do the images match what they're saying, and where are we getting our information, and documenting all of that process. So there's a lot that can go into those multimedia projects. So
oh, absolutely. I definitely had them combining those Common Core standards, going and doing the information and research first, and then using that.
Sure.
So that was where they got with that. And yeah, and this was a sixth grade group.
Oh, thanks for sharing. Yes, Adobe Spark. Thanks for adding the information on that. Screencast-O-Matic, yes, another great tool. I'm going to put Screencastify and Loom. Those are screencasting tools. Common Sense Media is a great resource for Common Sense Education. Has reviews of educational technology tools, and it looks like whoever shared this link, it's specifically best tech creation tools for, video and animation, and then, I'm not sure, coding and game design. So if students are designing things in Minecraft, if you have access to Minecraft or Scratch. Scratch is another great one for students who want to code interactive activities or games or animations. And that's really accessible for younger learners, but I've seen older students use it too and get more complex with their coding, but that's a block-based coding tool. But Common Sense Education in general is a great place to go. Like if you hear about a new tool and you're not sure what it's about, you can always, like, if I could spell correctly, if you wanted to look up maybe Adobe Spark, they have reviews of most ed tech tools, and it's loading, of course.
And while
But
that's
oh, there we go. There we go. So you can see it shows Adobe Spark, and then it shows some additional like related tools. But if I go within Adobe Spark, it has a brief overview of, it has a learning rating, a community rating, a privacy rating, and it's based on, they have educational experts, and then they have an opportunity also for just any educator that's on the platform to give their review. And then they've got some screenshots and pros and cons and bottom line. So this is definitely the place to go if you're unsure about a tool. I haven't used Adobe Voice. I'm curious now.
It's easy. It's basically you just talk over like moving images and things like that. So or pictures. Yeah, basically pictures. You talk over it, and it reminds me really of iMovie sometimes. If you use one of their templates, that kind of is what that reminds me of.
That's nice. Okay. Continue to add to that document if you have other tool ideas to share. And then just would like to hear your final thoughts. I used to think, but now I think. So for example, I think somebody in the chat already said, I used to think podcasting was challenging, but now I have some tools to get me started. So that can be our example, but if anybody else wants to share.
Well, while they're typing, I also just want to mention, Caitlin, you kind of hit on the privacy evaluations by Common Sense. And the one, I guess, tip that I would give is I would always opt to use tools that your district or school provides because they usually have licenses and they have looked into the privacy features for students in particular. And if you are going to be using tools that are not provided by your district, because that's not always feasible, you really need to make sure that you check the privacy policies, especially if a student is required to create an account to use them. A lot of them have age restrictions. So if the terms of service say that it's not for students who are under 13 years old, which is really common, then you should probably not be using that tool with students. And for those of you who mentioned you have a coach, those are sometimes really good questions to ask a technology coach in your district or a technology expert at the district level. If you ever have concerns or questions about that. So that way you can make sure that you're using age appropriate tools that protect students to the maximum degree possible.
Yes, thank you for making that point. And that's definitely important to consider. I know there's a lot of exciting tools that we've talked about today or that you might find when you're exploring and searching for things. But you definitely want to check the privacy settings and check with your district, and definitely use your coach if you have one as support in that, because right, you want to be mindful of student privacy for sure. And I'm glad to see that some of you are excited to try out new tools. Let's see. Oh, I used to think it would be challenging. Now I think it won't be that hard. I'm glad that you all are excited and that you found some new tools to explore. So that's really great to hear. And let's see. Yes, that's a great point too, Sherry. So really emphasizing that modeling learning with your students, right? And learning alongside your students. That's something that can be really valuable for them and really helps to empower students and to really model that learning process as well. So yes, plus 1000%, everybody grows together. So we only have a few minutes left. I do want to ask you that you all fill out the feedback survey that will help log your attendance and provide feedback on today's session. If you requested during registration to receive a completion certificate, you should get that soon via email, also with a link to the video recording and the slide deck. I think, is that also included in that email? If not, the video recording will be on. I haven't seen, thank you. I haven't seen, I know you do mention this from session to session, but I haven't actually registered for a session, so I don't know what that email looks like. But if you want, the recordings are also posted on the Summer of Powerful Learning website as well. So there will be a link posted to a YouTube, to the video on YouTube as well. So that's all on the Verizon Digital Promise Summer of Powerful Learning website. So you can see the past sessions. It says watch now, and that just brings you a link to a video on YouTube. And then that also shows you descriptions of all of the upcoming sessions on Summer for Powerful Learning. Next week, adapting social emotional learning for multicultural contexts. That's going to be a really great session. And then looking at creating rubrics. So if you're thinking about implementing some of these tools in a project-based learning environment, rubrics can really help to hold students accountable and document that learning process. And then evaluating your tech tools for student-centered use. We mentioned Common Sense today. That session will look a little bit more into the evaluation piece and thinking about research-based evaluation. And then there's a newly added session, how to use New York Times the Learning Network activities. So if you're not wanting to start from scratch, definitely looking into using some of those existing resources. And all of the details are at the Summer of Powerful Learning link, which Sherry posted into the chat. And then if there aren't any questions, we'll thank you all for attending today and for participating in the chat and sharing your tool ideas. And thank you all for watching as well. So have a great rest of your day.